Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. The world is loud, but for these few minutes it can wait. Settle in and listen well. The Carpenter's Silence, a tale of Joseph. I learned the news on a Thursday. The sun was setting, and I was finishing a door frame for a man in the next village. My hands were rough with work. Cedar shavings covered the floor of my shop, and the smell of cut wood filled the air the way it had filled every day of my life since I was 12 years old. I was thinking about the wedding. I was thinking about the house I was building for us, the bed frame I had carved with vines and leaves along the headboard. Then her best friend came to the door, with a face like stone, and I knew before she spoke that something had broken. Mary was with child, 3 months along, she had quietly said. She had been visiting relatives in the hill country, and now she was home. And now, what is a man to do? I did not shout. I did not throw things or curse or weep. I laid down my mallet and wiped my hands on my apron and walked outside. The sky was turning orange and purple over the hills. Somewhere, off in the distance, a dog barked. Children laughed in the street, playing some game with sticks and stones. The world continued as if nothing had happened. But my world had ended. I had loved her since we were young. I had watched her carry water from the well, had seen the way she moved through the village with a kind of quiet grace that made other women seem clumsy. I had worked 3 years to pay the bride price. I had built her a house with my own hands, had sanded every beam until it was smooth as skin. I had imagined our children, had pictured teaching my sons to shape wood the way my father had taught me. All of that was ash now. Ash and silence, and the smell of cedar that would never again mean anything but loss. The law was clear. I knew what my rights were. I could expose her publicly, bring her before the elders, let them do what the law demanded. They would stone her outside the village walls. I had seen it done once, when I was 14. I still remembered the sounds. I still woke sometimes with those sounds in my ears. I could not do that to her. Whatever she had done, whoever had touched her, I could not be the one to cast the first stone. I decided to divorce her quietly, a private bill of separation, a quiet ending, and she could go somewhere else and start again. It was mercy. It was the best I could offer. It was still a kind of death. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my mat and stared at the ceiling and listened to my own breathing. I thought about the house I had built for her. I thought about the bed frame with its carved vines. Someone else would sleep there now, or perhaps no one at all. I thought about her face, the way she smiled, the way her eyes caught light. I tried to hate her. I could not. I could only ache. The dream came near morning. I know it was a dream, because I was finally asleep, but it did not feel like sleep. It felt like waking up for the first time. A figure stood in my room, made of light and terror, and I could not move or speak or breathe. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It filled my chest like water filling a cup. Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. What is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Yeshua, for he will save his people from their sins. I woke with the dawn light on my face, and my heart beating like a hammer on wood. My hands were shaking. I sat up and pressed my palms against my eyes and tried to understand what I had heard. The Holy Spirit, a Son who would save, a name I was commanded to give. It was impossible. It was also true. I knew it the way I knew the grain of oak, the weight of cedar, the angle at which a joint must be cut to hold. I went to her that morning. She was sitting in her mother's courtyard, mending a garment. Her hand stopped when she saw me. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red from weeping. She had been waiting for the judgment. She had been waiting for me to destroy her. I did not speak. I could not find words for what I needed to say. I simply sat down beside her and took her hand. She looked at me with those eyes, dark and deep and full of something I could not name. I held her hand, and we sat in silence, while the morning birds sang and the sun climbed the sky. That was enough. And that was everything. We married quickly. The village talked, of course. They counted the months on their fingers and whispered behind their hands. I heard the words they used. I saw the looks they gave. I said nothing. What could I say? The truth was stranger than any lie they could invent, and no one would believe it anyway. I had learned to live with silence. I had learned that some things cannot be explained, only endured. Then came the census. The Romans wanted their count, their taxes, their control. Every man to his ancestral town, they said. For me, that meant Bethlehem, 90 miles south over hard roads. Mary was 8 months along. The child pressed against her from within. She could barely walk. But the law was the law, and we had learned to obey. The journey took 9 days. We traveled with others going the same direction. A small caravan of families bound by the census to places they had not seen in years. I walked beside the donkey, steadying her when the path grew rough. I watched her face for signs of pain. I prayed in silence with every step. At night I built fires and held her close against the cold. Her belly moved beneath my hand, the child shifting and kicking, already alive, already restless. I still did not fully understand what grew within her. I only knew I had been given a task, and I would not fail it. Bethlehem was crowded when we arrived. Every room was taken. I knocked on doors until my knuckles bled. No one had space. No one cared about a pregnant girl from Nazareth and her carpenter husband. We were nobody. We had nothing to offer but desperation. An innkeeper finally took pity on us. Not a room, he said, but a stable behind the inn. It was warm, at least. It was dry. It smelled of animals and hay and manure, but it was shelter, and that night shelter was enough. I made a bed of straw for her. I held her hand as the pains began. I had helped animals give birth. I had seen lambs come into the world, slick and struggling. This was different. This was her, crying out in the darkness, gripping my hand until I thought the bones would break. This was blood and sweat and the ancient labor of bringing life into a world that did not deserve it. The child came near midnight. I caught him in my hands. He was small and red and wrinkled, and when he opened his mouth, he cried like any other newborn, hungry for air and warmth and milk. I cut the cord with my knife. I wrapped him in strips of cloth we had brought. I laid him in the manger because we had no cradle. Because this child who would save his people had entered the world with nothing, owned nothing, needed nothing, but a mother's milk and a carpenter's protection. The animals shifted and breathed. The stars burned through the gaps in the roof. And I knelt there in the straw, a carpenter, holding the Son of God. And I did not understand. I still do not understand. I have never understood. But understanding was not required of me. Only faithfulness. Only showing up when the dream commanded. Building only what I was given to build. Protecting what I was given to protect. They came later that night. A small group of shepherds, wild-eyed men, smelling of sheep, babbling about angels and glory and a sign. They fell to their knees before the manger. They wept. I watched them and said nothing. I was good at saying nothing. I had learned that God does not need my words. He needs my hands. He needs my obedience. He needs a man willing to stay when every reason says to leave. I raised him as my own. I taught him to hold a hammer, to measure twice and cut once, to find the grain and follow it. He learned quickly. His hands were clever. Sometimes when he worked beside me in the shop, I forgot that he was not truly mine. Sometimes I remembered, and the weight of it pressed on my chest like a stone. I never spoke of the dream. I never told him what the angel had said. I did not need to. He knew. From the beginning, he knew things I could never teach him. I was only the guardian, the protector, the man who built the door frames and kept the wolves away. That was enough. That was my calling, not to understand, but to obey. Not to speak, but to act. Not to demand explanations, but to trust that the one who sent the dream knew exactly what he was doing. The carpenter does not question the architect. He simply builds what he is given to build. I am old now. My hands shake when I try to hold a chisel. My eyes are dim. I cannot see the grain as I once did. I will not see what becomes of the boy I raised. But I have done what I was asked to do. I stayed when I could have left. I protected when I could have abandoned. I built a life for a child who was not mine and loved him as if he were. And in that building, in that protecting, in that silent love, I found something I never expected. I found that obedience is its own kind of understanding. I found that faithfulness is its own reward. I found that the greatest honor is not to comprehend the plan, but to be trusted with a single piece of it. Selah.